We're going to talk about remote operating. I thought maybe you wanted to learn how to do it, so I put these slides together so you could do that. The way I started out with remote operating was about 10 years ago. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds good.
Sure.
Okay.
You bet.
Remote operating then, and I use remote hams. It's free. You can download it from the internet for free. And right away, within a few minutes, you can start receiving, and you can use it as a reverse beacon network. You can even check your audio and do it with a single sideband. Remote hams for transmitting is a little bit more, so we'll go there because that's what I did. And using your own station, the first thing you have to figure out is how you're going to be able to turn it on and off. And then remoting in using your PC in the shack, and remoting in to your loggers and your WS-JTX. And the way I do it now is I remote in with a flex, but I used to remote in with ICOMs and do everything with ICOM. What I found I couldn't do with ICOM is I was going to buy a 7610 is you couldn't control the power level remotely. And setting it manually was not adequate for me because every band wanted a different drive to get maximum drive. So sure. I just, for the price, I would go with the Flex. But you can do remote on CW. You can use other people's stations right away if they give you transmit privileges. And then you can do remote transmitting and receiving, and it gets your ham fix cured. And I do remote antenna selection, and I do remote rotor control, and we can talk about latency and low bandwidth and things like that. So if you go to remotehams.com, just Google it. You have your client, and that's what they call it. It's like remote control framework for radio broadcast. Crazy name, but RC4, you pull up this little blue symbol and you click on it and you open it up, and you'll be able to listen to other stations. We'll scroll down a little bit, and 1, 2, 3, we'll be on our way. So step 2 is you download RC4, and you're just about ready to start receiving. The first thing you do is when you open it up, you're going to see a lobby, and it's a list of all the remote ham stations around the world. And you can go through the list and listen to any of them. Every one of them will let you listen practically. Very few of them won't. And one time I was trying to work, I think Iraq or Afghanistan on 40 meters, or some de-expedition over that way. And I thought, well, he's sure not coming back to me. You know, I'm jumping all over wherever the QRG is, and I'm looking for the call. And you know, after a while, I went to remote hams. I got a guy in France, and I listened to on his station, and I couldn't hear myself. I changed antennas, and I could hear myself. So after that, I had a fighting chance. I made the contact. So it's great service. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this little window right here, and I'm going to type in W8RJ, and then I'm going to double click on his station, which was found. It's blue. And this is a, as it says back here, it's a K3 with a KPA 1500. And it'll work 160 through 12 meters, CW ready, and it'll do, you know, 750 to 1,000 watts. And first thing you want to do is not violate his instructions. They're very simple. Click on M-Tune to tune up the rig before you do anything else. Because I have an X here, that indicates that I have transmit privileges. So I would just click OK, and I can look at the avatar of his radio, and I'm logged in. I have transmit privileges, and I can do CW, I can look for DX spots, things like that. And we actually have so first thing I did is hit M-Tune and wait for the SWR to clear with the automatic tuner. And you're going to want to, plug in a cheap headset or any expensive headset. Anything will work. Bluetooth headphones, whatever you have. And then over here you can select them, select the speaker and select the mic that you're using. And then over here, you can adjust the volume and you can adjust the mic gain. You need some red in your oscilloscope pattern to really modulate. It's just the way it always is, it seems like, on almost every station of remote hams. So one thing you can do is you can go down here and you can adjust the audio on your own speakers. I normally don't run my speakers full blast. You might want to do that or turn them up to 50% or something to get a little bit more control back here on this volume control. And for mic gain, when I set my own station up, I had to go in, and just recently I did this for the demonstration. I had to go in and turn my mic gain all the way up to maximum so that I could really modulate the radio. Otherwise, I was only getting 10% modulation. And this way I was getting something normal. And that happened before too, I think. So you can see we've got, 923 watts. It's a pretty nice station. I talked to K5P on it, which was Palmyra Island on 80 meters. And I actually was all set up on 160 with Roger's loop to work him on 160. And as I started to transmit, his power level was a little too hot, and he does not allow his guests to control the power level. It was just too hot, and it tripped the breaker on his amplifier. And so that was all done for that day. The next morning, KP5 wasn't there, and I didn't get him on 160. But I was in Florida at the time. So I used to use this setup from Florida for my own station. And of course, before that, I used Roger's station or a few other people that let me transmit.
Nice.
W8RJ, you got CW down here. You can put in macros for CQ, QRL, things like that. And you can type in the call sign of the person you're trying to work. Then as you call them, the macro will be all set up, things like that. You can see what you're typing and things like that. And it's a type thing. Unless you want to buy their unit, they have a device you can buy for $189 that makes using a paddle and everything possible. But all these controls are adjustable, whether you're on single sideband or whatever. I really liked Roger's radio because it had dual watch, something that my radio didn't have. Really nice. Well, step 4 would be to scroll down in remote hams a little bit further and set up your own station. So you need to download RC4 server, not the client, but the server, the gray one. And before we do that, we have to gather 2 bits of information in order to set up your router for port forwarding. And to set the 2 COM ports on your rig, one for CW and one for rig control. So what you would do in your computer is come down to the bar here and enter command prompt. Okay, as you start to enter it, I entered 2 words, this pops up. Okay, click here. Oops. And then we need to write this down. You need to write down the IP address, the internet protocol address of your router. And you need to write down the internet protocol address of your PC. Okay, so you're gonna get to command prompt, all right? And you are going to see this, users, blah, 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 Steve, and a prompt. At that prompt, you type in ipconfig. Okay, a whole bunch of things scroll down, and at the bottom here, we're looking for two things. We're looking for your IPv4 address, okay? With the Internet of Things, everybody's gonna have this giant address someday that can handle the world. But right now, we're still using IPv4. And your router is right here, default gateway. This is your router. Oops. 192.168.1.1, very common that it will be that. And then you'll notice here, oops, that 192.168.1.108 is the address of this computer that you're using. And that's the one you're going to connect to remote hams. So this is its preferred dynamic name server address. Whenever it can, it's going to give it that address. So you should be okay. So then open a web browser like Internet Explorer or Firefox and go to the address bar and enter the IP address. If you have trouble, maybe open Google first because you don't really want to, you're not trying to search for this like on the interweb, you're trying to just get to your router. And this should do it. And then a new window prompts opens up for the username and the password. You've probably not gotten into your router before, so it has admin for both the username and the password, and then you can change it later. And if you've already changed it, well, then you know what it is. If you've already secured your password and things, you know what it is. And you can put in the name of your router and your password and hit OK. And I have a Cisco router, and all of them are pretty much like this. You're going to have a spot where you look for port forwarding, and a lot of times it's in applications and gaming. And you're going to be making these ports. You're going to call them RC4 servers, so you know what it is. And they're going to use these numbers to do the audio. They're going to use port 4524 and 4525 and 843 and 943. So you set that up and you assign it to the computer that you're using. And that's where we got the 108. Any questions?
What about if you're using a VPN? Does that make a difference?
Yes, it does.
Figure it would.
Some VPNs will work and some won't, because some won't allow port forwarding and things like that. So you'll have to check. If you don't have one yet, I could maybe look it back up and tell you which one to buy, because some of them will do it and some won't.
Steve, have you used this with both CW and sideband?
Yes, mostly with CW, but of course with sideband too. It really, I mean, I'm just a CW guy, so probably was 75% CW and the rest voice.
And then what did you use? Did you have some kind of an interface at your end before you had the Flex?
Well, this is the interface I had before I had the Flex. This is it. So you use this free program and you can connect your radio. As long as you have, you know, a fairly modern radio that's got like an RS-232 connection or a USB connection.
Mm-hmm. So you connected your paddle to the radio, and then the radio was connected to the computer and talked to the computer through this remote ham software that you installed, the remote ham client software. Is that correct?
Kind of. I didn't use a paddle because I didn't buy their interface for $189.
Oh,
So
okay.
I just settled for the
Keyboard.
keyboard.
Gotcha.
But when I
Yeah.
got the Flex, then I have the key. I have the paddle.
Yeah.
That was the piece I was missing. Thank you.
Okay, so port forwarding, this is how you do it, and that's how you figure out what to do with it, and how to open up your router. Any other questions?
Are these instructions available in the software from the software company?
Yes. A little bit they are, yes.
So Steve, just a quick question. You mentioned at the beginning that you had transmit privileges. How do you get those with these other stations, these other radios that you're working on? Is that something you establish with the operator on the other end beforehand? I mean, do you write them an email, or do they charge, or how does that work for you to get in and use their equipment?
It works like this. You get on their station, and the first thing you do is, if you have nobody else using it, you're not bothering anybody else that's currently using it, then you just try to transmit. And immediately a box will come up and say, you don't have transmit privileges. Ask for transmit privileges. So you click, may I please have permission to transmit? And then they'll get back to you.
Okay.
And I'll show you where you can use yours and where you can give permissions. Because what they'll do is they'll come down to the shack the next day and they'll say, oh, I got 10 people that want to transmit on my radio. Well, let me see. This one's verified. He uploaded his FCC license. He took a picture of his license and he uploaded it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and give him transmit privileges, and that's it. All he had to do was click on my call sign that was in the wait box, and it went over to the approved box, and you're ready to go.
Wow. So no clubs, no vetting, anything like that. Just give them the basics and kind of come off as a good guy, and you can basically get privileges then.
Yeah, and there's not everybody will do that, but quite a few will. Some are set up for clubs only and stuff like that.
Right. Well, that's kind of cool. Huh.
Then there are some super stations out east that I understand rent out the time.
Pay to play
Yes. Yeah.
and pay a lot to play.
Yeah, I had heard.
No, it's really
Steve,
not that bad. It's really not that bad. It's like $100 a year. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket for all the money you'd spend on all this stuff. But this
Yeah,
part's free. This part's
You don't
all
have-
free to run your station.
You don't have to climb the tower.
You don't have to climb the tower. You may not be able to run a contest for the whole contest because somebody else might want to run it, or you might be able to make some kind of arrangement.
I have a question about awards. Now, if I understand like DXCC, Steve, if you live in Michigan and you're in Florida and you remote into another Michigan station, that to my logic would count for an award, right? Because it's within your same home Michigan, your home entity, or is that not?
Depending on what award you're trying to get. If it's only state related, then you're good. You know, if it's I don't know, if it's a county or something like that, it just depends on the award you're going after.
You know, the way it actually is these days, it's kind of silly, but you know, I kind of go by the rule that it was when I was a kid. If you're within like 90 miles of the station, then it still counts that you can get an award for it. But actually the way the FCC looks at it these days is ridiculous, because the USA is such a big country. You could be in the West Coast and, you know, work Asia and get an award even though you really live in Michigan. Or you could be on the East Coast and things like that, Florida or whatever. But so you could be anywhere in the US and get DXCC awards if you just work from the US. Anyway, so let's go on. What do you think? You want to go on to the next step?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to minimize this. So the next step is you have to scroll down to the bottom of your router and say save settings.
Okay.
Then you open up RC Forbes server. You've already downloaded it. It's on your computer. You click on or double click on the gray icon. And the first thing you'll see is you select the type of remote you're going to do. And it's going to be full duplex. And you can just move over to this tab. And well, before we move over to that tab and we tell it what COM ports we're using for the radio connection, we need to determine which COM ports are connected to your rig. So it might be COM port 1, or you might be using a USB. Like in the ICOMs, you can select, you're going to do their CIV through USB. And then which COM port is going to be your CW interface. This is my CW interface. There's a 9-volt battery and a 1 transistor circuit with a reed relay. And this is a dual USB to RS-232 adapter. And this unit right here, I bought for $6 on eBay. A guy in Poland made it. It's a level converter is really all it is, but it's an RS-232 to CIV interface that takes the, and changes the level of the signals to the right level for CIV. Okay. I connect my reed relay across a straight key. Now I'm ready to send CW. Label your ports because Windows will assign things, drivers, to certain ports, and it can get really messed up. ICOM has specific drivers, and you want to, download the driver as they say, follow the instructions to the letter. So label your ports and always use the same ones. But if things get messed up, you can always go open the gear and restore your ports. That used to happen with Flex quite a bit with updates and stuff, but it doesn't happen anymore. Well, use USB cable if you want, or you can do the rig control the old-fashioned way with an RS-232 type thing, and or something like that, and you connect into your CIV. So which COM port is that? Okay, what we need to do is open up Device Manager, okay? And from Device Manager, we're gonna look at the ports, and we're gonna unplug that cable. We're gonna unplug this cable, and we're gonna find out what disappears and what appears. Make sure we know what port that's plugged into. And that adapter of mine has got a 1 and a 2 on it. So now that we know that, and turns out my other side, where I had the ICOM label, that was connected to COM port 3. And that is not any old ordinary Silicon Labs USB UART bridge. That is ICOMs, and you must have ICOMs. even though it'll appear on your screen. So don't just like plug your rig into this and expect Windows to download the correct driver, because it won't. It'll grab this driver from somewhere and it won't work. And everything will be, well, you'll just have to uninstall it, that's all.
So you're talking about the USB when you plug it in via USB.
Yeah, if you plug a USB in and it doesn't have the driver, it'll go get it. And you don't want it to go get it. So you want it to already have that driver in there.
I think
So
that's unique to ICOM. Is that correct?
I'm really not sure.
Okay.
And on the back of the rig, then you can either connect with USB rig control or you can connect with the CIV rig control. But you're going to use a key. And now we'll go back to that screen. We said remote type would be full duplex, and the radio connection, COM1, pick a baud rate, and don't worry too much about if you don't know the hexadecimal address of the radio, because when you come over here and you pick up your rig, then you'll pick up the brand and the model, that is, too, and then it'll fill it in with the right one. But that's something that you could check in the menu. You can go to the drop-down menu and you can see what it is. And you can set up USB to be CIV, or, you know, and a lot of you guys have K3s, and this program was written for K3s. So remote operating via remote hams is free. It works well. You know, give it a try, and you'll have fun with it. And you can check your audio. WA8Y uses my station once in a while, and when he got his hooked up, he had me talking through his station to people over there and back to Washington and back to parts of the U.S. and he was on mine, I was on his. It was fun. But okay, this is my remote station now since 2017. This is it, right there. And pretty easy to travel with. 2 cases, a Pelican box and a leather sack. The Pelican box holds the Maestro and all kinds of accessories like adapters and cords and mics and paddles. And the laptop is in the leather case. Any other questions about remote hams before we move into how I do my flex?
No, that's good.
You talked
Okay.
about latency and bandwidth. Is that in the next section?
Yeah, the next one.
Okay.
You will see it occasionally. Yes, you will. We'll talk about it at the end. So first thing I have to do is minimize this. Is I have to open up a browser. So I take the laptop out of the case, plug it in, open it up, and you know, connect it to some Wi-Fi, and I open up a browser, and I type in the name for my power distribution unit, which is a dual com cyber switching unit that has 16 outlets. Half of them are 250 volt and the other half are 120 volt. And I start at the top and I click on and I turn on the flex power supply. That way the flex gets booting up, and you know, the next thing I do, I turn on the monitor, then I turn on the amplifier. I turn on the this outlet. Really? I turn on that outlet? Why is that on? This one's labeled. It's my rotor box, my rotator, which is a green Heron 21. I turn on the flex power strip, and this turns on a digital logger relay connected to the remote on the back of the flex. So I have remote control to turn it on and off. It doesn't just come on with the power supply. And then I have a power strip for the PC and maybe a few other miscellaneous things like my LPA 100 and things like that. Okay, so as that's starting to fire everything up, it won't take very long and the PC will be up and running because I've gone into the BIOS of my PC in the shack and I've set it up to turn on whenever it gets power applied to the cord. So I turned on the power switch, I turned on the power outlet, so now I have power. So pretty soon I'll be able to open up Real VNC on my laptop. This is another free program that you can just Google Real VNC. You don't really need the server, that's free too. You can just use the player. Real VNC, and I connect back to the PC in the shack. So this is the last picture it saw probably, and that's why that picture's there. That little icon, I just double click on that and the password comes up. I put in the password and then I can see my PC in the shack and I can start opening up things. I open up the amplifier on the PC in the shack so I can see the screen of the amplifier. It has a touch screen and but you know, I mean, I can't really I don't want to open it up separately and have two things separate. I could, but I don't want to. So I open it up in the PC in the shack. And while that's going on, then I can come back, turn on the Maestro, and by this time the Flex 6600 has booted up and it finds my radio. And the SmartLink connection through the Maestro, it wants to connect. So I say connect to it and it says, what software do you want to use? And I pick the one that I'm using and click run and I'm ready to go.
Nice.
Pretty slick. What was the name of that that remotely controlled power strip again?
It was a power distribution I got on eBay for 60 bucks. A very stout, robust thing, and it just has a graphic user interface. It's very easy to use, just like a router or something like that. Very easy to use. And you could just you know.
How often does it lock up or kick you out or any of those things when you're in the middle of a QSO? Or
It happens. It happens. You know, every once in a while your internet goes down and you lose connection. It happens. And you know, I have a thing called PST rotor control. I think it's about $50, and it's a piece of software that connects to just about any rotator there is. I used to use Yaesu, but the Yaesu box is pretty inaccurate, and they wanted $500 for the interface. I bought one from China for like maybe 60 or 50 or $80 or something, and it worked, but it said it was what do they call it, past 360. You know, it went another 90 degrees past 360. It said it was that model, but it really wasn't. And my model did allow me to rotate past 360. And it was a little bit, yeah, 450. And it was a little bit tricky to figure out. I always had to bring a chart and sometimes go back to a remote camera to look at what it was. Now I have a green heron. I still have a Yaesu 1000 rotor, but I have a green heron controller. And it's very easy to set up. And you can actually just grab this clock hand and move the router, the rotator. But I usually put the number in here and click go. I don't really use this screen, so I usually just close it so I have more space. Now, how do I select and switch antennas remotely? Well, the same way I would in the shack, partially with the amplifier and partially with the flex. The automatic antenna switching in the amplifier is that it has 4 antenna outputs, and you can use all of them or just one of them. And you can assign names to them and select what antennas for what bands. So that pretty much allows me to run 160. I have a double L. 80, I have an inverted V. I have a ZEP for these 3 bands, and then the quad does the rest. I don't really have one. I don't really have 6 meters. But I have this Ameritron remote coax switch, the RCS10, to do remote switching of the quad loops. And that box is really nothing more than a diode OR gate. And you have this 12 volt supply to the rotator, and you flip the rotary switch and apply 12 volts to one of the gates, and that decides the BCD output to go up to the remote switch up on the boom of my quad. So what I did is I disconnected the 12 volts from the rotary switch, and there actually have provided screws on the back of the RCS10 for all of these 8 switches. And I bought this SaneSmart 8-channel 12 volt USB relay module and connected it to the back of the RCS10. A USB bit cable is in this chip. It has the FTDI chipset that Flex needs. And so this will act like a bit cable. Plug a standard USB cord in there. This one has the little square one like on the back of a radio, and then the other end is the Flex end, which is the regular flat type. And then in the radio, I open up settings and I select USB cables, and it found the cable, identified it. So I need to go in and edit it. And I say, I want, I want it to listen to slice, the active slice. I want it to be selecting this switch by band, 20 meters and so on. And I activate those. And then it follows the radio. And I have a cat cable also plugged in the back that goes to the amplifier, just USB to USB, but it's a special cable that is a reverse modem cable, and they both have the same flat standard USB connectors. And I also have a remote pan tilt zoom camera. So if something's not working, I can take a look at the camera and see what's happening in the shack. So when I'm gone for the winter, I'll set it up like this, and I can move it around, and I can see what's going on. I can see if things are powered up, if the right lights are connected here or on, and I'm connected to the right antenna. And
You could see smoke.
I can see smoke. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't had any of that, but I've had problems. You have problems, and sometimes you can fix them and sometimes you can't. And sometimes my neighbors come over and done things. I mean, like obviously I have to leave this amplifier turned on. And I leave it turned on here because then I just turn the power on and off at the plug, at the 240 outlet, at the 250 outlet. One day I went to my daughter's, and the amplifier wouldn't turn on because I didn't leave it turned on. So he came in, he flipped it on for me.
Great.
Could you see that in the camera?
Yeah, I could see it in the camera. It wasn't turning on. I could see why. Yeah. And I also use a thing called DNS. Dynamic domain name service allows you to access your devices from the internet via a simple to remember domain name. So instead of connecting to everything through a difficult to remember IP address, I just remember my call sign. And
Which you can usually do, right?
yeah, you can do it always. I mean, if you can't, then you have to look up something. But I've never really had too much trouble with it. But one day I was in Real VNC and I accidentally deleted it. And I had to start over again. You can actually have Real VNC on your phone, and I put it on my phone, and actually it was very helpful in giving me the answers. So, but it's good to have paper too. So it's good because you don't have to use a static IP address, which is a very bad thing to use, really, because it's so easy for a hacker to find where your stuff is.
Sure.
So that's about it, guys.
So
Two
even
ways
with
to
the
remoting.
even with the Flex with the Maestro, you still have to use the ham radio remote and all that other.
Nope.
Oh, you
Nope.
don't. Okay.
No, because that was the first way I did it, but with the Flex, I don't need it.
Okay.
You can actually connect the Flex to remote hams. I've never done it. I don't see the need.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's what I thought was I was gonna go remote with a tower and all that, but we had idiot family members got in the way. But that's a different story. But so I have a Flex and a Maestro, and that seemed to be the selling point on it. One of the selling points on it, but.
Yeah, all you need is a remote on and off switch.
Yeah, right.
Steve, what can you tell us about the latency part of this?
Sometimes when I'm operating in a CWT, the latency kills me because people are coming back to me fast in a little mini contest, and the latency might build up to 500 milliseconds. But
Oh, yeah,
normally
that's killer.
Normally the latency is just 180 or less, and you can learn to live with it. Occasionally someone will come back and you miss the first letter of their call, but most of the time the latency seems to be transparent. It's there, but you don't really need to know about it because their signal came to you, you heard it, you sent back, and you don't really need to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that primarily due to the internet, what's happening in the internet connection?
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a certain amount of processing to run a Flex, a lot more than most radios. And it takes a certain amount of latency to go, like I run my radio from Barcelona, Spain,
Wow.
and from, Florida and stuff like that, Iowa, and
It's amazing that it's even possible.
It is.
And then you had also mentioned bandwidth, but I didn't hear you talk about that.
Oh yeah, let's talk about bandwidth. So you do need a very good internet connection. I took my radio set up on a cruise ship, and I got free internet as part of the package. And that free internet would barely allow me to connect in low bandwidth mode. It wasn't even worth using. So I would have had to pay a price to get high speed bandwidth, something that you can't really measure that easily with doing an IP test or anything like that.
So we're talking about internet bandwidth again here.
Yes,
Yep.
when you get if you buy you have your cable connection, it's much faster than DSL. You can get 100 megabits per second, you can get 1,000 megabits per second, and you probably need at least 20 to be adequate. You can read email with 500 kilobytes per second, no problem.
Yeah.
But you need more for the Flex. The Flex needs quite a bit of information. There's a Wi-Fi in my car. It's adequate. It's supposed to be able to connect 7 people and their devices. So it is adequate for one Flex radio. And I can run remote from the car.
Huh.
I've run it while I'm in the car wash. I've run it while my wife's driving, and things like that. But
Is that via cell connection?
yes, and I've been in hotels where I can't connect the Flex to the Wi-Fi that they have because they need you to use a web browser, and Flex doesn't have quite that kind of a setup. So I've just turned my phone on as a Wi-Fi hotspot, and you can use your phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. If you have an unlimited data plan, it's viable. But if you don't, it would use up a gigabyte pretty quickly.
Steve
So,
mentioned, I'm
go ahead.
sorry. KLX mentioned the pay-to-play stations, which are becoming a big thing on the East Coast. Super stations set up in Maine. And I understand it's almost an arm and a leg for a 48-hour contest. You know anything about that, Steve?
Very little. I've used them a few times at the Flex booth, and I wasn't that impressed. But obviously, it would be a great way to go. I mean, you'd have to find out how much time you're going to need and when it's going to be available, when you're going to be available, and
yeah, we're talking about a 48-hour contest. N5DX regularly does that through a station in Maine. And I was just curious if anyone knew.
They're about $60 an hour, I think.
Yeah, I've heard something of this sort.
Yeah.
well, that's a lot more than $99 a year, which is what they charge if you just want to be a casual user.
Well, I think it's $60 an hour plus $1,000 a year or something for some of those.
Yeah.
And the thing with like Roger's station, you're at the whim of Roger. If he wants to use his station, then he'll kick you off.
Sure.
And that's pretty much true for anybody.
So the next expedition to Hurt Island will leave 3 stations there for redundancy and solar power for the batteries to run little inverters or whatever. Charge people $90 a contact, but you can be a real Hurt Island expeditioner.
Wow.
It's a thought. I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll come to that.
Yeah.
Well, they were talking about that in one of the virtual Hamfest forums where they went to VP6 and they thought, well, with the pandemic, they wouldn't be able to go back. They're not allowed. And because the island wouldn't have any way to take care of people with COVID. So he thought, well, you could set up a remote station there, and that might be the next way to do it. I mean, all around the world, there are these stations, and contesters are even do multi-operator from different locations. I mean, that's how they activate WA8Y all the time and things like that. Have you done that, Steve? Steve LX?
Oh, no, I haven't, but I have never done any remote operating at all, but I've been hearing, it's even been suggested to me that I set up a remote station here. I guess that's if all the main stations are busy, but I'm not too interested in that, although the technology is very interesting. The one thing that always enters my head is whatever happened to the FCC rule about not using ham radio for business purposes?
Yeah, I don't know how they exactly get around that. You know, there's shacks for rent in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I know.
The you're not conducting business over the radio. The
Not-
communication part is not the business activity.
That makes sense,
Sort of.
sort of.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's fair. I mean, I think if you can have DraftKings and FanDuel then and bet on sports, then
Yeah.
Well, that was really interesting, Steve. Thank you. It looks like you put a lot of time into researching that. It didn't happen overnight. It's looked like you paid your dues on getting that working so well.
thank you. Yeah, Greg can hook his station up in 2 seconds because he has K3s, and a lot of you guys do. So it'd be, well, I mean, any rig can really be hooked up easy.
Mhm.
Great job. Thank you.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.